What's up, everyone? Welcome to the NBA Daily Podcast, your home for useless facts about basketball. My name is Dawson Shine, and I'm your host. Starting off today, we're going to be talking about history being made last night. The Warriors, 72 wins. They beat the San Antonio Spurs 92-86 on the Spurs' home floor. Unfortunately, that win meant another record would not be broken this season. San Antonio Spurs' perfect home record was ended at 39-1 last night, in an incredible matchup between powerhouses. First half, it looked like neither team was going to be able to score. 35-35 at halftime, lowest scoring for both teams this season, mainly because both teams have amazing defenses, with Bogut anchoring the Golden State Warriors defense, plus strong perimeter defenders such as Andre Iguodala, Sean Livingston, Klay Thompson, and then of course Draymond Green. They are able to lock down any team in the league. Same for the San Antonio Spurs. Players like David West can defend very well. People like Danny Green are great on the perimeter. And then, of course, the Claw, Kawhi Leonard, who was obviously a DPOY, Defensive Player of the Year last year. So it was an incredible matchup between two heavyweights. Unfortunately, the Spurs were not at full strength. They were missing both Boris Diaw and Tim Duncan, who, of course, are very important to the lineup, except Tim Duncan is not as important when facing off against the small ball Warriors. But still, they were missing two very key components to the team. But it doesn't really explain how bad they really played in this game. They were outmatched really the entire second half. Once the Warriors got into the open floor and started scoring regularly, they were put away. They couldn't keep up, despite them trying very, very hard. For example, LaMarcus Aldridge, 24 points and 10 rebounds on amazing shooting numbers. He played out of his mind. Every time he got the ball in the post, he could not back down anyone, but instead he just stepped back and faded away over them. His jumper was wet last night. Also, Kawhi Leonard had 20 points and 13 rebounds. Unfortunately, due to the stifling defense of the Warriors, he only shot 7 for 22, which is very poor for him because he's very efficient normally. He doesn't take too many threes, and he doesn't miss too many shots. He only takes the ones that are really good for him to take. But they were outmatched. They were not able to keep up with the Warriors scoring because no one else contributed. It was only Kawhi and LaMarcus Aldridge on offense, and everyone else was pretty bad. Of course, the worst player of all on the court was my least valuable player, Danny Green. He was 1 for 7 from the field, 0 for 6 from 3. This is the guy that set the finals record for most threes in a series, and now he goes 0 for 6 from 3 in one of the biggest games of the season. 2 points, 2 assists, 2 rebounds in 25 minutes. That's a starting caliber player who's supposed to value defense and be one of the best shooters in the league, and he contributed almost nothing. And he definitely did not shut down anyone. And of course, Curry went off on the other side. 37 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and then they had good contributions from across the board, all their players. Even despite having a very slow start to the game with only 35 points in the first half, they showed that they were such a formidable offense that even the legendary Spurs defense could not keep up with them. But it was an incredible match because this is two teams fighting for records. They were fighting for history in the NBA, and it meant that they were going to fight to the end. The Spurs were down by about 11 with about a minute and a half to go, and yet they clawed back on the back of Kawhi Leonard, of course, and made it within 4 points at one point, 90-86, until the Warriors ended up closing the game out with free throws. So it was definitely entertaining to watch all the way to the end, unlike the previous game where the Golden State Warriors crushed the Spurs from start to finish. This one was very close, including the Spurs having a 9-point lead in the first half. But it's hard to contain Curry. It's hard to contain Draymond Green. It's just hard to contain any of these players once it gets going in the third quarter. Because the Golden State Warriors, after halftime, made the adjustments they needed to get in the open court. They had 16 fast break points compared to the 6 fast break points for the Spurs. That's almost a 3-to-1 ratio. And that's very important when it comes to the Golden State Warriors offense. When they get out and run, you see, the Warriors don't just live off of transition layups or even transition dunks. They're not a high-flying team necessarily. What they get off on is threes. 3-pointers from everywhere on the court, even in transition. I can't even tell you how many times I've watched Steph Curry dribble down the court, pushing it, looks like he's going to drive all the way to the hole. The defense backs up, waits for him to drive in, and he stops and pulls up from 30 feet out and drains it in their face. See, the Warriors are so good from the three that they can stop on a dime and just shoot it, and the efficiency is almost as good as taking a layup, if not better when it comes to Steph Curry. Klay Thompson also, he loves the pull-up three from the center of the court. He loves it, and you'll see him whenever he brings the ball off of a long rebound. If he comes up and all the defense is backed up near the hoop, he'll just pull it up from the top of the key and drain it in half the time at least. It's incredible to watch. The Warriors were able to use fast break points, three-point shooting, and improved efficiency in the second half to put away the Spurs in a game that was really a must-win in my mind for confidence. Showing these Spurs that they were able to beat them on the Spurs' home court in the biggest game of the year and maybe the biggest regular season game of NBA history really showed how good the Warriors are in pressure situations. They've been talked about all week as looking like they were really letting up on the gas pedal, that they were struggling to keep this pressure of winning 73 games off their mind. But instead of choking, going against the Spurs, throwing the game away, losing in the final minutes, they actually went out there and won it. They played in such a pressure-filled environment at the AT&T Center and showed up and won. Even after a very, very poor first quarter and first half, they looked like they were dead in the water in the first half. 35 points by this year's Golden State Warriors, a team that has now won 72 wins. No one would have expected that. But they changed it in the second half. They made it the tempo that they want to play at, and they put away the Spurs for good in this game. And it's definitely incredible to continue to watch their streak, which of course will end this week in 3 days. They're going to be facing off against the Memphis Grizzlies again, and it's going to be the record-breaking game if they can win. They're going to be going for 73 wins, which is incredible to think about. Even some of the Chicago Bulls players, such as Scottie Pippen, who were on the 96-97 team, actually called up or even gave quotes to the media about how impressed they were with this Warriors team. No one expected anyone to ever break this record. I mean, who would have expected a team to win 73 out of 82 games? And yet the Warriors are going to be trying to do that in a couple days. And I cannot wait to watch. It's going to be the must-watch game. Unfortunately, there will be something else that will be on at the same time in the NBA that will be just as important, if not more important to some NBA fans. And that's going to be Kobe's farewell. It will be his last game. His farewell tour will be coming to an end. And it's going to be very sad for some people. I can't wait to watch it, to be honest. Not just to say good riddance as a Celtics fan, but also to watch a great retire. He's a legend, a living legend at the moment. And it's going to be incredible to watch his final game. But it's not his final game just yet. And he performed last night as if he was the old Kobe. He went off against the Houston Rockets, who were fighting to keep their playoff hopes alive. He had 35 points on 10 of 22 shooting and didn't even play in the second quarter. It would look like a great revival of the old Kobe. You know, one last play, one last game where he just went off. And no one expected it either. 35 points from a 39-year-old, that's not something you see every day. Unfortunately, the Rockets kept their playoff hopes alive and crushed the Lakers 130 to 110. But it didn't just happen because they were a better team. Harden went off as well on the other side of the court. He had a monster 40 points, 13 assists, and 4 steals. Those are the kind of numbers that you see put up by Michael Jordan, by Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. Harden does that regularly. He's had at least 6 or 7 40-point, 10-assist games this season, and that's incredible. Remember, he was an MVP candidate last year, second only to Stephen Curry. And this 40-point game was a little bit more than usual for specialness. He actually tied Moses Malone's record of 12 40-plus point games in a season for the Houston Rockets. That's a record that's really, really important to Harden, I believe, because he's showing that he actually cares about this team. Even when they're down, even when they look like they're going to be out of the playoff race, he is fighting every single game and carrying them on his back. Unfortunately, he can't carry them as well as he did last year. Last year, the whole team played pretty well, and he carried them to victory into the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. The 2nd seed. But this year, he's really having difficulty with the supporting cast. Corey Brewer's playing like absolute trash. Terrence Jones, he's reverted back to trash as well. Honestly, the whole team needs to get thrown into a dumpster truck. It's just awful to watch. But Harden continues to ball out. He's trying hard. He's showing that he can play a little bit of defense. He's nowhere near what he should be defensively, but he is giving up a lot of energy on offense. 40 points and 13 assists is a minimum 66 points for his team in a game. That's a lot to be attributed to, and he runs their offense like the point guard. It's incredible. So I do cut them a little bit of slack, and I really wish that they would make the playoffs over the Dallas Mavericks because I want to see playoff Harden again. Last year, he showed what he can do in the playoffs, both good and bad. He had the 44-point Western Conference Finals game against Stephen Curry, but then he also had the 14-turnover Western Conference Final game. So I'd like to see both sides of Harden again, because watching James Harden play is really fun. Although some people don't enjoy his free throws or his foul antics or sometimes his bad defense, I still love to watch great offensive players. He shows that he can light up the scoreboard like no other player in the league, and that he is able to actually carry a team in all facets of the game except defensively. And that's incredible to watch. And I really wish he would make it to the playoffs. Because I get it. Dirk retiring, it'd be great to watch him play one more playoffs. But honestly, the Mavericks aren't as good, and they have no chance, even a fighter's chance, of knocking out the Warriors. Whereas I believe the Houston Rockets could really have a good matchup against the Warriors. I don't think they can even win a game, but I think each game will come down to the wire because Harden can keep a team inside a game. If they didn't have Harden, of course, they'd be a lottery team. Maybe even one of the worst teams in the league. But with him, they have a chance to at least stay in a game. They won't get blown out by 40 in the playoffs. It won't happen. Whereas the Mavericks, I feel like they could get blown out by 40. And that's why I really wish the Rockets could actually make the playoffs. However, they have to really claw back and hope the Mavericks lose out. But they still have a chance, unlike some other teams, like the Chicago Bulls, who were eliminated yesterday from playoff contention. I spoke about it on Sunday about how they still had a chance because they beat the Cavaliers. However, that chance is gone. The Indiana Pacers decimated, dismantled, tore apart, crushed the Brooklyn Nets 129-105. Just an absolute rout from the start. And with that win, they clinched at least the 8 seed, if not the 7 seed. So the Bulls are out of the playoffs, Pacers are in the playoffs. They've clawed back from a very bad season last year without their all-star, Paul George. However, it's so different this year. With Paul George back and active, they've shown that they are a team to be reckoned with on any given night. Of course, Paul George is a star in this league, and he can go off at any time. He has such a good shot and such a streaky jumper that if it starts falling, he could put up 40 on you without you even knowing. But above all, they have had a perfect draft last year. Miles Turner, he had 28 points last night and 10 rebounds in only 25 minutes. He is showing that he is going to be a force to be reckoned with in this league for coming years. I can't even tell you how many games he's had with over 25 points. And as a rookie. Also, Paul George back in action, 15 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 22 minutes in this blowout. He was putting the team away in the first quarter. It was over before it even started. And of course, that's something that the Nets fans have been way too used to this year. They really have had very little bright spots in their season. They do have one good player who played last night, Sean Kilpatrick. He looked really good. I was surprised, to be honest. 26 points in 28 minutes off the bench. He's definitely a small piece that could contribute to some team. He's not a great player. He won't be on any contenders and be a contributing starting player, but he looks like he's a good bench warmer. Like you can throw him in a game if you need a couple quick points. And I think that's a good thing. You need those on every team. And so they do show some promise. They have players like Brook Lopez, who will be able to play for coming years. Thaddeus Young, he'll be able to play for coming years. They really just need to work on building their team through the draft. Unfortunately, they have no draft picks. They give them all to the Celtics, so they really don't have a future, or at least for the next 6 years. So most of their fans are pretty much depressed about this, and I would be too. The lack of draft picks, the lack of players on their roster that are actually good, and their lack of cap space. I mean, they do have quite a bit, but they're going to need to sign so many players just to become playoff contenders, never mind championship contenders, that it won't even be possible in this offseason. They'd need to get Kevin Durant, they'd need Dwight Howard, they need LeBron. I mean, they just have no chance of competing. And so it seems like their season was over before it started. Plus, they even had Brook Lopez and Thaddeus Young sitting the last few games, which meant that they stood no chance against any of these teams. I mean, the Indiana Pacers aren't amazing. They're good enough to get the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. That's good, not amazing. And yet, they were blowing them out by 20 before halftime. That's pretty bad. And honestly, it was probably closer than it should have been. If the Pacers had kept their starters in for the whole game, this might have been a 50-point blowout rather than a 20-point blowout. But it was a great game for the Pacers organization anyways. Despite playing against a weak opponent, They made it to the playoffs. They clinched it, and you can't take that away from them. It's a huge game for the organization because it shows that they could rebuild in 1 year. And I shouldn't even say rebuild, they retooled. They made it back to the playoffs after a year without their entire superstar. He was not able to play until the last 6 games of last season. He was rusty as all hell coming into this year, and yet, he's playing phenomenal. He's shooting well, better than he used to. He's defending just as he used to. He has the same athleticism, throwing down 360 dunks after the whistle, and he's carrying his team to the playoffs. They look really good, and they have such potential for the future. Their bench with CJ Miles, George Hill in the starting lineup, Paul George, Monte Ellis, Ian Mahimi, their whole team looks really promising, and it seems like it's a great retooling by the great Larry Bird as the GM, and I'm impressed by it. However, that's enough about the Pacers' playoff clinching spot. There are other teams tonight that are going to have huge playoff implication games. Mavericks versus the Jazz at 9 p.m. is going to be a huge deciding factor in whether or not the Houston Rockets can make it to the playoffs. The Mavericks, if they lose, will fall to the same amount of losses as the Houston Rockets, giving them a chance to make the playoffs. And that's huge. And if the Jazz lose, then that means that the Rockets cannot make the playoffs at all. They'll knock them out. The reason for that is because the Rockets are already at 40 losses. If both the Mavericks and the Jazz end up with 39 losses, the Rockets will not be able to make the playoffs because the record will be too bad. And if the Jazz lose tonight to the Mavericks, both will be guaranteed to have no more than 39 losses, eliminating the Rockets from playoff contention. So it's going to be a huge game to watch. And on the flip side, in the Eastern Conference, you have the Celtics versus the Hornets. That's a huge game because the Celtics, if they continue to lose to all these other contenders in the playoffs, will drop to the 6th seed. They need to win tonight in order to stay in contention for the 3rd seed, hoping the Hawks lose to the Cavaliers. Otherwise, the Hornets might be able to win and take over the 4th seed after being all the way in the 6th seed 2 weeks ago. That's an incredible run by them. And it'll be a huge, important game to watch, hopefully down to the wire and entertaining. Enjoy these Monday night games and any other game you want to watch in the NBA. Hope you check back in tomorrow. Thanks for listening.